Okay, I'm going to leave the mic to Catinca Tabacaru, who's a gallery owner presenting on the fair, and she can introduce the conversation today.
Merci, Salimata. Hi everyone, welcome and thank you for coming to see what I promise will be a fun and informative discussion. My name is Catinca Tabacaru. I have a gallery in New York City. It's 2.5 years old and I represent 14 artists from 5 continents. The artists are my friends, they're my family, and often my inspiration. So with me are 2 incredible human beings. Raphael Chikukwa, curator of the National Gallery of Zimbabwe, curator of the Zimbabwe Pavilion at the Venice Biennial, and the man who, although maybe not single-handedly, has brought Zimbabwe onto the international contemporary art scene. So you're about to hear everything from the most important voice right now. Admire Kamudzengerere, who is a Zimbabwean artist, 33 years old, has been stealing the show in our booth, which is an affair, and makes incredibly profound and precise work, ranging from printmaking to performance to video. He studied at the Rijks Academy and will be doing the Triangle residency in New York in 2017, which is an incredibly prestigious program. We're going to do this in a personal way. So I'd like to start you off by us telling you a story. And by the end of that story, I hope that you will be more familiar with our journey, what we're doing, and where we're going. So we'll tell you how we met and what brought us to that moment. So Raphael, maybe we can start around 2001?
Thank you, Catinca. Firstly, I would like to thank the organizers for bringing us here, Victoria and her team, and also to thank you, the audience, for coming to this conversation between 3 of us, myself, Catinca, and Admire. But basically the journey, my journey and our journey, the Zimbabwean journey, it starts way back. The ideas of African art showing in the West, I'm sure those that came before us were part of the pioneers. And I would like to say our founding director, Frank McEwen, was really very influential to what we're doing today. The blueprint was set when the gallery was officially opened in 1957, where a number of exhibitions were done at the Louvre, the ICI, MoMA, and very important platforms that took place in Zimbabwe. And the founding of the International Congress on African Culture that happened in 1962 in Zimbabwe, that saw a number of international gallerists, curators, artists coming to Zimbabwe. But all this is what we're just stepping into. And also the diaspora voices after the musician Delote. I mean, the likes of Simon, Okwi, Salasan, and many others. Those are some of the people that really inspires our thinking and the journey of what Zimbabwe is today. And some of the independent galleries that have been there in Zimbabwe, from Chapungu, Gallery Delta, to many others. The list is endless. But basically, I want to come back to 2001, as you said. I was a curator in residence in Switzerland in Biel, under Proevesia, and that also included my Venice trip, myself and Pet Mautwa, a South African artist. When we arrived in Venice in 2001, our question was, where is the representation of Africa at Venice? So that's where the journey started. And for me, it was really questionable, and same with Pet Mautwa, who is a very important artist in the African continent. And so that's when the dream started. Then in 2004, I curated an exhibition at the Manchester City Art Gallery, which was called Visions of Zimbabwe. So through my other colleagues, I was able to meet with the two Spanish curators, Rosa Martini. We met in Venice, we met in London, and tried to do the Zimbabwean Pavilion. But, I mean, it wasn't the right time. I failed to make it. Then in 2010, I joined the National Gallery. So I thought it was a very important moment to really kickstart a dream that many people have been dreaming of. And I'm sure in 2007 there was the African Pavilion, which was done by Simon Jami and Fernanda Ovim. And many people were very critical about it, but it was also very important for also to inspire people like us. And so when I joined the gallery, I spoke to my boss, Mrs. Doreen Sibanda, who is the executive director, and said, well, this is the idea I have, but she said, where are we going to get the money? So I had to tap into the network, spoke to the head of visual art at the British Council, Andrea Rose, who really embraced the project, spoke to Marie Cloud, who is the director of the Museum of Monaco, who embraced the project, spoke to Lucy Tuya at the Culture France, embraced the idea. So our duty now was to go back to our government. So I went to the government and say, well, the basket is half full, so can you fill it? Or do we really can afford to fly our flag with other people's monies? And the government embraced the project. So that's when we arrived at Venice in 2011 with 4 artists, Barry Biko, Tafuma Gusa, Mishek Masanvu, and Kelvin Dondo. The exhibition was entitled Seeing Ourselves. That really made a mark at Santa Maria della Pieta. So the following edition, we said, do we really afford to just be a one-off? No, it was not an option for Zimbabwe. So we went back to the government and said, well, we want to go back to Venice because it's an important platform. What we have seen at the Venice Biennale, it's important for us to go back. So the government embraced the project. And we arrived back in 2013 with 5 artists. Portia Javaira, Virginia Chiota, Michele Mathison, Voti Tebe, and Rashid Jogi. So there were 2 established artists and 3 emerging artists, who today are represented by major galleries that includes Michael Stevenson, Goodman Gallery, Tiwani Gallery, Taiben Gallery, and many other galleries. So that was really the moment I met Catinca.
It wasn't. But I'm glad we go so far back. In 2013, I was an independent curator, and I had come out of a career as a human rights attorney. I used to work for the office of the UN prosecutor in the Rwandan tribunal. I had lived in Tanzania, and I had an interest in general in the continent that was very instinctive. And so when I went to my first Venice Biennial in 2013, and maybe we did meet, maybe you're right. We did, right?
We did, yeah.
I went to my first biennial, and the first thing I wanted to do was go see the African pavilions because there were 4, I believe. It was a very small grouping at the time.
Well, I mean, 4 in a way, because I mean, this is where the so-called Kenyan pavilion, so, you know, which wasn't Kenyan.
Exactly, it wasn't Kenya, it was mostly Chinese, I think.
Yeah.
Lu Peng was showing. So I went into the Zimbabwe Pavilion, and to give you an idea of the Zimbabwe Pavilion, you're walking towards the Giardini, and then you go into this building, you go up to the 5th floor, and you don't know what you're really going to find because you're going up these stairs, and there opens this beautiful space with all of these windows. And I almost fell over. It was some of the best work I had ever seen. And I kind of had to do a double take because I was like, Zimbabwe, okay. I don't think I'd ever looked at Zimbabwean art before. And so with a lot of pride in having found it and slight shame in not having ever looked, I sat with it for a very long time, fell in love with some of the work, especially Virginia Chiota and Portia, who really stole my heart for the work primarily, and then also for the female subjects within the work. And it really stayed with me, and that was my experience. I walked out of the Zimbabwe Pavilion, it remained with me in my mind, it remained with me somehow instinctually in my soul, and I left And in 2014, a year later, I opened my first brick and mortar space in New York City. And I remember before I was opening, I was talking to several of the artists that I'd already represented without a space, and we were saying things like, this won't be just any type of gallery. We're going to run around the world, we're going to experience things, we're going to share ideas and share voices. We'll go to places like, and I remember myself and Justin Orvesteimer at the same time saying, Zimbabwe. So that moment, among several other moments, had kind of planted a seed that at some point, we as a group, as a collective, would end up in Zimbabwe. Fast forward to 2015, but before that, Admire, you are at this time at the Rijks?
Hello, everyone. I went to the Rijks in 2013 and 2014. Yeah.
And while being at the Rijks, what is the feeling in Europe? What is it like to be a Zimbabwean artist in Europe? What is it like to know that your country is now on its way to a third Venice Biennial? Is there anything you can add to that? If not, we'll come back.
I think in 2013, this was like the first time for me also like stepping into Europe. So I had no idea what to think or what to make of it. Even by being at the Rex Academy, I remember I kept being asked like, do you know what it means to be here at the Rex Academy? And for me, I had no clue, so I kept on saying like, I don't know. And they kept asking me, so what are you gonna do here? And I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do. But all I know is that I am here and I just don't know what this means. And I guess I'm probably like I was the second person to be accepted in Zimbabwe at the Rex Academy. And the first person was Patrick Makupe, who was accepted in 2001. And I was the second person. And what really shocked me was how they spoke about how the interview was like challenging. Like about 2,700 applicants had applied, and we were 36 candidates that were shortlisted, and they only wanted to take 12 people. And I went there with no idea. So I remember I was talking to Raphael and I was like, man, I don't know if I should go. I mean, like for 36 people and there were 12, I don't know if I have to go. And you say, Admire, you have to go, because I mean, for you, this would be like a compliment or a beauty. Just go there and see Europe and enjoy Europe.
Good advice. Raphael. So you told Admire to go and really put himself out there for the Rijks Academy. There'd only been one Zimbabwean artist before. And then he was accepted.
Well, I mean, sometimes when you are a curator, you have to really challenge these young kids, because I mean, the most important for them is to get a platform for them to be able to explore, to grow. So when there is these calls which are coming out from around the world, you can only inspire them and only to challenge them so much that at least by the time they come out of these challenges, they will be something out of it, because education is key. And in the Bele they say, ukuhamba uzala induna.
What does that mean?
When you travel, you're educated. And when you always think your mother is the best cook, it's something.
She is.
Yeah, so when you step out, you open your eyes. So I'm glad he took the challenge, and he's something now. And there's more coming out of him.
Much. Take us to 2015.
Well, after 2013, I'm sure many people all thought that, I mean, maybe Zimbabwe won't make it again. For us, myself, my director, executive director, Mrs. Doris Zibanda, when I started the project, we said, well, we will keep on going to Venice as much as we can, and we'll keep on seeking funding from government so that we can keep the existence of Zimbabwe at the Venice. And we remained at Santa Maria della Pieta, which is our traditional venue. And so then we decided, no, we're going to go back Then I selected 3 artists: Chikonzero Chasunguza, Gareth Nyandoro, and Masimba Wati. The exhibition was entitled Pixels of Ubuntu. When I had to travel to Netherlands to see Gareth, because Gareth was at the Rijksacademie. So I arrived in Netherlands in December. It was very cold. I'd already selected, but the idea, he was already started working.
So he's now the 3rd Zimbabwean artist at the Rijks.
Yes, he is. So when I arrived at his studio, it was really amazing just to look at his, the board of work which Gareth had. Then I said, well, maybe 1, 2, 3, 4, and with another 5th piece. And I said, well, this is what I'm looking at. And just pack these and make sure that this is the address. And, it was just amazing to be in Netherlands. And at the same time, being at home, constantly going to Masimba's studio, constantly going to Chico's studio, who is also one of the senior artists amongst the 2. And all these 2, Gareth and Masimba, they all came under Chico's hands. So it was very important to actually have Chico to lead the pack. So that's when we arrived back in Venice in 2015. And you also came to see.
So in 2015, I had opened the gallery. We were at this time a year old. It was going well. And we were in Venice to do a collateral event for Justin, who I had mentioned earlier, who's also here in the booth. And the first thing I kept talking about was, we must go to the Zimbabwe Pavilion. You guys don't understand. It's the best artwork I saw 2 years ago. And sure enough, we walk into the Zimbabwe Pavilion, and Gareth's work is magic. And I would encourage you all, actually, if you don't know Gareth Nyandoro, to get to know him, and if you know him, to come and see a piece of his from 2011 to see what he's done in 5 years, because it's very informative to this new work, where it came from the more rudimentary materials before he had paper and support and galleries. It's always nice to see what the origin of something is. So we walk in, we all love it, and I recognize this man behind the desk, and I'm not sure where I recognize him from. I didn't think I was memorable enough in 2013, so it warms my heart to know that Raphael remembered me. And I had this complete, and you can see me, I get excitable, this complete expression of, Raphael, we want to come to Zimbabwe, please, how can we come to Zimbabwe? I think there's something that's happening in your country that is of critical importance to the art world. And Raphael said to me, and I wonder if he remembers it differently, but Raphael said to me, if you are serious, if you are willing to come down to Africa, everybody expects African artists to come out, to come to the West, to meet the West on their own land. If you're willing to come into Zimbabwe, I will help you. And he did. And he connected me with Chico, who was one of the artists in the pavilion, and the teacher of all the artists, actually, in the pavilion, and many before. And Chico became my partner in Zimbabwe 2 months later. And together we built an idea. And it was this idea that I would come with 3 artists, one from Israel, one from US, and one from Suriname, Rachel Monosov, Xavier Robles de Medina, and Justin Orvestimer. And he would bring in who he believed was the cream of the crop of the contemporary young Zimbabwean art scene. And we arrived in Zimbabwe, not knowing anything beyond that. And on the second day, we had a meeting. And we were a little bit nervous about whether these artists would come. And slowly but surely, in this very awkward way, because everybody expects there to be a barrier. And we expected to be seen as foreigners. I'm curious to see what you guys expected to be seen as. But we were so excited to see who our potential partners in all of this would be, our collaborators. And that day, Admire showed up. And maybe you can tell us a little bit about how you found out about the residency, why you came, and what it felt like to be there.
I found out about the residency from Raphael and from Chico. I think in 2014, I got my residence permit in Europe to stay in Europe. So when I got my residence permit, I only sort of stayed there for 4 months. Then for me, it felt like I had nothing to do in Europe. Like, okay, there was nothing. I mean, like for me there, like my material and my resources are all in Zimbabwe, and it felt like I could also like do something. So I spoke to Raphael again about, okay, I don't know, I mean, what I'm doing here in Europe, and as I know, I mean, like Zimbabwe, everybody knows things are bad in Zimbabwe, and I'm worried, I mean, like, yeah, but I don't know, I want to come back to Zimbabwe. Then he said, Admire, your job is still here. So I went back and I rejoined the National Gallery as a visual arts lecturer. So from there, I mean, with students and stuff, the first thing I started doing was to build a printmaking studio with students, with all those sort of like the ideas and things that I learned. So from that, I mean, like, he encouraged me, like, okay, there's this artist that are coming, maybe you should go and see. So I remember I drove to come and see you guys, and we sat, and I had no idea what to think or what to expect, because this was so like, kind of like a footing. There was no sort of like a pre-structure of what's going on. And I was like, okay, I'm just gonna check it out and find out what's going on. And when I saw you guys, I was like, okay, I don't know, I mean, like, is it like some kind of like, I mean, all these misconceptions about exoticizing Africa when foreigners come, and I'm like, okay, I'm just gonna wait and see. And that's how it was.
After getting his residence permit, I said, remember a song by a Congolese artist who was in exile in Tanzania, who died in 2010, Mambo Remi Ongala. There is a song called Good or Bad is Still Home. So that's what I said to him. Good or bad is still home. Well, there's so many misconceptions about when you come to Europe and you want to go back to Zimbabwe, or you want to go back to your respective countries. It might be Congo, it might be Kenya, it might be Nigeria. People say, no, don't go back, remain in Europe. So I said, remember that song, good or bad is still home.
Before going to Zimbabwe, we too looked at ourselves in this way that maybe the Zimbabwean artists did, and we thought, wow, is a lot of this work going to be making fun of ourselves about these foreigners going into Africa and searching the exotic? And one of the things that became clear on the very first day, just so you can imagine, I think there's a picture up here. I haven't been watching the slideshow and I can't remember if we put it in, but it's just a group of us sitting around. And again, we didn't know what the exact structure of the residency would be. We just knew that we wanted to do it. And so there's a group of about maybe 15 Zimbabwean artists, a few sort of administrators, Chico, Samaita, the leaders of Zimbaneke Arts Interactions, which was our home space and really our home for this whole thing. And then the 3 foreign artists, Justin, Rachel, and Xavier, myself, and Raphael, who was my assistant director at the gallery. And we just sat, and I think the question was, what is important to you and what is important within your work? And I think everybody sort of expected to see this difference between the foreigners and the locals, and it just didn't exist. Everybody was dealing with post-colonialism. Everybody was dealing with identity. Everybody was dealing with gender. Everybody was dealing with the spirit and philosophy. And within that 1 or 2 hour meeting, it became very apparent that we are all really living very similar experiences and very similar journeys in different territories, in different countries, with different details. And that was part of the magic of what brought us together. I think the next step, once we moved forward, was everybody chose to trust. And sure enough, when you look at the booth here, the 6 artists who have now been traveling together, working together, collaborating over the last 1.5 years, they trust each other. And they trust that they want what's good for one another, and they help. And the projects that ended up happening at the residency, some were individual, some were collaborative, some were a mixture of the two. Everybody had these very unique, quirky activities that were happening. And it turned into something new. And I think as we, unless there's something else to say on this topic, and I'll open up to both of you, I'd like to move forward with what is this new thing? What is next? Because we see it in this fair. There's something happening here that hasn't been happening somewhere else. There's a focus on a continent, not a focus on its people or on its issues, but on the continent itself from both inside and out. And I think that's really interesting. And what is next? Raphael?
There's so much. I mean, for us at the National Gallery and in Zimbabwe at large, there's so much to do. And now we are looking into 2017. The National Gallery, after the Venice Biennale, we decided to do a publication, which I'm sure if it's published by KEBA. It's called Maonero. It's an insight into Zimbabwean art history. So that's one of the publications we've done. Then now we are looking into 2017. The National Gallery, through Frank McEwen, hosted this AKAA, the International Congress on African Culture, that saw many museum professionals that include Alfred Barr, William Falk, and many others coming to Zimbabwe. So in 2017, the gallery is celebrating 60 years. So we are looking into celebrating the 60 years by hosting another International Congress on African Culture, inviting scholars, curators, really mapping up the developments that have taken place after 1960, after these past 60 years, and the new developments that are taking place in the continent, because the continent is different. You know, right from CCA Lagos to Zoma Contemporary to Koyo in Dakar, to Douala Arts, to Nairobi Arts Trust, to Johannesburg, Cape Town Art Fair, to AKAA, to 154. I mean, these developments have taken place in the past few years. And the arrival of African countries at the Venice Biennale, those new developments are something which we need to interrogate, and also looking into the future. So for us, that's very important. And Zimbabwe will be going back to Venice in 2017. So that's what we're looking forward to. Thank you.
Admire?
Well, I don't know what to think of it. What is next? I don't know. For me, I'm continuing to working. I mean, like before, what I know is that my work was mainly painting and printmaking, and now I've actually taken my work even further. So I'm experimenting with work that involves relational aesthetics, and also what I realized, I mean, like having lived in Europe, was the idea of how financial sort of like capital sort of like works, and then being in Africa, it's a different story, it's a different language. I mean, like we've got what's known as social capital, which I think I'm trying to sort of like work with and put within the community to rebuild the community and structures.
Can you define social capital?
Social capital, well, I think now, I guess there is like this thing which they call like crowdfunding, and crowdfunding exists mainly in other sectors, but in Africa we do not have this thing which is called crowdfunding. We've got this thing like me, you and me, so we, and that's what we work with, we call it Ubuntu. So this is like, okay, when we do something it's like paying forward. So you do something because you throw something into the future. It doesn't matter whether you get it back or something, but you've already sort of like posted something, which eventually that thing can yield something or provide something. So I'm working with the community, I'm putting my ideas out there, and yeah, that's what I'm doing.
So the project that started as this residency, supported by everyone that you see here, has now seen 2 shows in New York at my gallery. It was invited back by Raphael to the National Gallery of Zimbabwe. They showed in Toronto last week, and it's here in Paris now. The future of that project holds a pushing forward, an attempt to bring that to more nations, to more people, to more institutions, and an effort to have the project grow. Because while Zimbabwe grows from its roots, I think what what we've seen here is that it's also broadening. So the introduction of foreign artists in has taken the local artists out. And so there's this exchange in and out, where both the foreigners are coming in, the locals are going out, and the project is growing. And it's gaining momentum, it's gaining conversation, it's gaining support, it's gaining more artists. And I'm curious, one thing maybe we haven't touched upon is how it looks from your side, Raphael, from the National Gallery.
Well, I mean, the National Gallery has always been open to collaboration. And for us, I mean, bringing back the exhibition to the National Gallery was really to showcase the Zimbabwean art, the Zimbabwean audience that, I mean, these collaborations which are taking place between our artists and those artists who are coming from outside, it needs to be seen at home. It needs to be seen by the Zimbabwean audience and to inspire a new dialogue to our local artists and to the audience at large, because it means a lot. And when I saw Justin and Rachel and Xavier, who we call Mofu, who has really kind of assimilated into our culture because of his totem, which is my totem, so he's my young brother. So that to me is also it's also very, very important that, I mean, they see Zimbabwe in another way and we see their work in another way. So we want to continue this collaboration because it brings in something to our audience, and it brings in something to the National Gallery because it has always been a center of contemporary art. It has been always a center not only for Zimbabwean artists but for artists from all over the world.
So the emphasis of not only showing African artists outside, but bringing in these other influences into the continent, which really takes me into maybe the last thing we'll touch upon, and besides kind of end comments, is this idea of the other, and how that, as we move forward, and I see the art world as really being at the head of this, but the other, the concept of the other, from wherever you're looking, disappearing. And disappearing in this fair here. They're, like we said before, the shared experience. Are you guys, and maybe we'll go to Admire first, have you changed because of this experience? Have your perceptions changed because of living and working in Europe, because of the residency, because of the relationships you've had with other artists? Is this, or am I just giving you a leading question that's not applicable?
I think as a person, I am changing quite a lot, because before I used to be a bit more impatient and just frustrated and stuff. But now I'm like how I think things and how I see things, and working with people, you also grow to learn to understand and to wait and to negotiate. And also, I think like during the residence with you guys, I mean, it was kind of like easy for me to collaborate with Justin and also to collaborate with Rachel. Like the whole idea of sort of like negotiation. I mean, in art we work with the language, but this language, I mean, in art, it's like an ever sort of like continuing and changing and evolving, and there is quite a lot of process of negotiating, of trying to put things in there. And when you work with that, I think it allows you also to grow as a person and to see things on a broader perspective. So I guess I'm a better man than I was before.
Can I push you a little more on this? Can you tell us what you hope with that language that you are communicating to the world? What do you hope that people's eyes are open to by looking and thinking and talking about your work?
My hope is that, or I hope that maybe Africa can grow into something that's bigger. Like art is bigger than me, and the shape of art, I have no idea how to grasp it. But what's beautiful is like when like as a teacher also, like when I teach, when somebody makes something and when you look at it, you're like, oh wow, I've been teaching but I've been taught. That's beautiful, like when those exchanges begin to sort of like happen.
Raphael, same question to you. What do you hope?
Wow. You know, Africa has contributed a lot to the global art scene. And my hope is for us to be able to harness that contribution. And to be able to harness those contributions, it needs all of us. And it is my hope that the African scholars, curators, artists would really keep working hard for us to be able to keep telling our story. Because we've remained passengers in our own ship for too long. And it is time that we work together as a continent, because the founding fathers, our founding fathers, the whole African nationalism, towards the independence, it was not only about political independence, economic independence, it was also about cultural independence. But we should not sleep. And this is why it is important for us to be sitting here and deliberating and keep interrogating where we are coming from, and where we're going. That's my hope.
I will ask both of you if I've missed something, what you'd like to say. But first, maybe let's turn it to the audience. If there's a burning question, we'd like to make sure that we can address it. Or any sort of question. And if not, we'll keep going. Oh, we're so complete. Is there something that Admire you'd like this audience, and maybe a larger broad audience at that, to know that we haven't talked about? I can be more specific if I'm putting in a position.
I guess if the audience is something they want to know or ask, I give it to the floor.
Raphael?
Sure, I've said a lot, and it's up to the audience now to, the most
You're
important
being
thing.
challenged.
Well, for me, the most important thing is that this is happening here in Paris at a very critical moment, very critical time, and we must seize the moment.
Yes.
Hi, I just want to congratulate you first for the coming to Zimbabwean Pavilion next year in the Miss Biennale. But my question was more in the lines of, we've seen last week was the first edition of Art Ex Lagos, which is the first contemporary art.
One second, I'm going to give you that. Maybe if you can repeat that question so that people Hello? Yeah. So last weekend took place in Lagos the Art Ex Lagos, which is the first contemporary international art fair in West Africa. And then I was wondering whether it's a space or room in East Africa to produce this sort of art fairs, and instead of, going outside Africa, just to, develop more of these spectacles for people to come to Africa and see African art.
Well, thank you for that question. Well, there are a lot of developments taking place in Africa. So this is why I was saying, our AKAA next year is to map up what has been taking place in the continent. And I also want to take this moment to congratulate Lisi and her team and the team behind the art fair in Lagos, because it was long overdue. Long overdue because Dakar has been taking the lead, Marco has been taking the lead, but there's been a Biennale which has also started in East Africa, the Kampala Biennale. The Kampala Biennale was inspired by Kla art, which then culminated into the Kampala. And that edition was, this year's edition was curated by another young or amazing curator who is based here in Paris, which is also very important. So there are events that are taking place in Africa. Those platforms are being created, and they're also inspired by what is taking place, like the 154, what is happening here in Paris now, and many other platforms, because as African artists and curators, you travel to these platforms When you come here, you're inspired. When you go back, you also want to plant a seed. So those are some of the seeds that are coming out of East Africa. And I know that as we are talking now, there is Kenya Art Fair which has started, which is actually taking place right now. So those are some of the developments that are taking place in the continent. We want more, but I mean, we have to go, like what we say in Swahili, pole pole. We can't rush, because you have to learn how to walk first before you learn how to run. So I would want to say that East Africa is coming out of its shell, because there are a number of artists in East Africa. The development that have taken place in East Africa, you've got cycle art, which is actually at the booth here. If you look back from Makerere, Margaret Powell School of Art, to Ruth Schaffner, the Gallery Watatu, and to many other things that have taken place, I say to Ato Malinda, a friend of mine, to say East Africa was a sleeping giant. So it's waking up now, because Southern Africa was kind of the center with the birth of the Johannesburg Biennale, which died in 1997, the birth of Johannesburg Art Fair, that also gave birth to the Cape Town Art Fair, and now you've got the Lagos Art Fair. For me, but before Lagos, you had the Lagos, the CCA Lagos, which was founded by DC, which is one of the most important platforms. So there are things happening in the continent, but we just need to take time, digest, and to seize the moment. And I'm sure in the next few years, something will be coming out of East Africa, or even in North. I mean, you've got the Marrakech Biennale, you've got the Cairo Biennale, which is no longer there, but I mean, there are things that are taking place in the continent. And I'm so excited that, I mean, we are here and we keep interrogating and questioning the developments that are taking place, and we keep dreaming and dreaming bigger.
Unless there's another one, no? I'd like to bring it maybe to another question and ask it to both of you, Admire as an artist, Raphael as a curator. What is the biggest challenge, and I don't mean conceptually, I mean actually practical challenge that you are running into in your ability to make your art, show your art, have people see your art?
Well, I guess the biggest challenge, art is art, it's really sort of like contextualizing it when you say art in Africa. Because when we also look at performance art, it has long existed in Africa for quite some time. And then the whole sort of challenge in Africa is to channel also the African audience and bring them to art. So how to do that is the biggest sort of challenge.
Is there an answer on the stage or in the audience about what is one way, or how do you bring a bigger African audience to art?
Well, I'm sure the bigger challenge, there are many challenges in the continent today. And for me, one of it is the future of museums in Africa. It's one of the biggest challenges. And then the audience building, which we are talking about, it's one challenge, and I'm sure that challenge is it's all over. And then the challenge is funding. Both corporate and most of the public art institutions, they are underfunded. And I'm sure we have a role to play, that we need to educate our politicians for them to really understand what role do museums and art institutions play in the continent. And that role, our politicians seem to they seem to be forgetting what our founding fathers were dreaming for. So that's one of the biggest challenges, because when you travel around the continent, you see that a number of museums are underfunded, and I would say there's also lack of, there are no curators, not many curators in the continent. And the whole curatorial issue and understanding of what the role of a curator is still kind of challenging to a number of people in the continent. And there's no capacity building. And I'm sure there's a need for all of us, those who are working and practicing in the diaspora, to be able to also look at it from that perspective and say, how do we go back and plow back? When a number of curators like BC, Koyo, Gabi, Tembi, and many others decided to go back to the continent and started these new initiatives, that has also contributed to spark what I can say a big fire that has inspired what is now taking place in the continent. And I'm sure we must thank and applaud those individuals, because the fire they've started has inspired, and some of the young artists who are coming out of the continent, it is because of them. And it's also because of the voices, people like Bonaventure in Germany, because we cannot forget about the diaspora. The diaspora is very important and is part of the development that are taking place in the continent, because when they come back, when they do their repetitive voices here, it's what inspires us, and it's what is driving the forces, and making sure that challenge the status quo to say it is important for you to give money to the arts, but we need to do more. And so that those challenges can be few, and we can bridge the gap. That's my feeling.
And really, this art fair is an exact example of an effect of these artists, of these curators coming back to the continent and working from within. Let's all not ignore the elephant in the room. African, anything African, culture, art, especially right now, is trendy. And I think for those of us who understand that African art has gone on for much longer before this trend came, and will continue for much longer, and this trend will last. This is a moment to really harness, to really push as much, as many voices, as much product, as much thought and ideas into the world as possible, because it is listening right now. And I think AKAA is one of the spaces where this is happening, and bringing it to Paris. I have spoken to so many people here at this fair who may have had a tangential interest in African art or in the continent, or have been there once or twice. But this has opened their entire world into how many possibilities, how many nuances there are to what's being talked about, to each of the countries within the continent, to the type of work that's making. African art is, we all know, is not just a mask. However, the world just found out. And that's really, really exciting. Because that brings an entire continent onto a scene that wasn't listening as well before. So I encourage all of you in this audience to talk to everyone and take advantage. Any final words, anyone? Any final question? And we're going to close it right on time.
Yeah. Thank you very much.